Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, those between, above, and beyond the binary, welcome to a glorious Thursday evening in May of 2020. My name's Colin Matty, and it's bedtime, brother. Hi, everybody. I got chocolate milk today. Oh my god, I'm so excited. I'm so happy to have chocolate milk. This was one of my favorite treats growing up, and I saw it on the shelf and kind of impulse bought it the other day, and now I get to reap the rewards of my hasty decision making. So, here's to you, everybody. Happy Thursday. The best way to get diabetes is to be lactose tolerant. At least that would be the best way for me. I'm gaga for chocolate milk. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for hanging out in the chat. Marin, you also have chocolate milk? Oh my god, the stars align. Are you going to drink the whole thing? No, I will not drink the whole thing. I, I can express a little bit of moderation. That would be a bad tummy time if I drank the whole thing. And as we established yesterday, I am in fact a baby. But that doesn't mean I need that much milk. I'm not exactly a growing boy anymore. At least not in the way that I would like to be. I'm tall enough, and I would wager that I'm also wide enough, but biology seems to dispute with me on that every now and again, especially after Christmas dinner. Nevertheless, welcome. I hope you've had a wonderful day. Cat Eyes Lucas spent the day reading. We had some gardening going on as well. I assume our resident MD was hanging out at the office today. There's no connection to diabetes, so no worries. Well, I was mostly thinking about the added sugar, but that's a relief. It's good to know that I can drink my fill of baby cow growth formula and remain non-diabetic. As I said, I hope you had a really lovely day. The weather up here in Edmonton was pretty nice, pretty strong sun, pretty fun clouds whipping around through the sky. And now it's a lovely cloudy evening, which will be nice to cool things off a little bit. Um, any big plans for the weekend out there? Anybody? Maybe we could talk about that afterwards. But I'd love to hear if you've got any exciting adventures coming your way, apart from the one that we're about to go on together. Yesterday, we read Chapter 10, The Return of the Lion, wherein Aslan made his first overt appearance in Prince Caspian, this fourth book here. I think he shows up in all of them, but this is the first time we've seen him, and it's about 2/3 of the way through. So, about time, Aslan. And something strange is going on because apparently Lucy is the only one that can see him. Edmund very nearly saw him for a moment, but couldn't quite get a grip, I guess. Aslan is also looking much older and much larger, not because he is older and larger, but because Lucy is older and larger. Something about the appearance of the lion has to do with the perhaps the age or maybe the innocence or virtue of the person perceiving him. Perhaps we'll find out a little bit more about that tonight. Cat Eyes Lukey, you're gonna play some D&D? Dang, that's sick. I've actually got my campaign coming up on Saturday. I'm playing a multi-class rogue warlock. He was saved from death by an eldritch fish god who he had to promise his life to. And he did. He washed up ashore, sole survivor of the shipwreck, and hasn't heard from the fish god since then. So he's been developing these powers in secret and just wondering when his time is going to come. Maybe this Saturday night. But that adventure is for another time and for another group of people. This adventure that we're going on together will resume with Lucy having returned to her sleeping siblings and our DLF, Trumpkin the Dwarf. And she has roused them and is going to... she and Edmund are waking them up, and she's going to try to convince them to follow her into the dark immediately to go see the invisible Catman, Aslan. So, I think we should find out how that goes. Kick back, enjoy your various beverages, chocolate milk, be they fermented or otherwise, boiled leaf water. Liquids are good. I love me some good liquid. Chapter 11. The Lion Roars. When the whole party was finally awake, Lucy had to tell her story for the fourth time. The blank silence which followed it was as discouraging as anything could be. "I can't see anything," said Peter after he had stared his eyes sore. "Can you, Susan?" "No, of course I can't," snapped Susan, "because there isn't anything to see. She's been dreaming. Do lie down and go to sleep, Lucy." "And I do hope," said Lucy in a tremulous voice, "that you will all come with me, because I'll have to go with him whether anyone else does or not." "Don't talk nonsense, Lucy," said Susan. "Of course you can't go off on your own. Don't let her, Peter. She's being downright naughty." "I'll go with her, if she must go," said Edmund. "She's been right before." "I know she has," said Peter, "and she may have been right this morning. We certainly had no luck going down the gorge. Still, at this hour of the night? And why should Aslan be invisible to us? He never used to be. It's not like him. What does the DLF say?"
"Oh, I say nothing at all," answered the dwarf. "If you all go, of course, I'll go with you. And if your party splits up, I'll go with the High King. That's my duty to him and King Caspian. But, if you ask my private opinion, I'm a plain dwarf who doesn't think there's much chance of finding a road by night where you couldn't find one by day. And I have no use for magic lions, which are talking lions and don't talk, and friendly lions, though they don't do us any good, and whopping big lions, though nobody can see them. It's all bilge and beanstalks as far as I can see."
"He's beating his paw on the ground for us to hurry," said Lucy. "We must go now. At least I must." "You've no right to try to force the rest of us like that. It's 4-1, and you're the youngest," said Susan. "Oh, come on," growled Edmund. "We've got to go. There'll be no peace till we do." He fully intended to back Lucy up, but he was annoyed at losing his night's sleep, and was making up for it by doing everything as sulkily as possible. Oh man, I've been there for sure. Where you're just kind of in a bad mood, and you like, yeah, okay, I'll do the thing, but I'm gonna make a real stink about it. How are they still doubting Lucy? Has she ever been wrong? I honestly don't think so. Lucy has a 100% track record in terms of, spotting the right thing to do. Whoo, made it. Welcome, Mulric. Good to have you. And what a place. Yeah, I was just talking about how sometimes I like to get really miserable and stomp around while I do the dishes. It doesn't typically help, in my experience. "On the march, then," said Peter, wearily fitting his arm into his shield strap and putting his helmet on. Good man, Peter. At any other time, he would have said something nice to Lucy, who was his favorite sister. Oh, he's playing favorites. For he knew how wretched she must be feeling, and he knew that, whatever had happened, it was not her fault. But he couldn't help being a little annoyed with her all the same. Susan was the worst. "Supposing I started behaving like Lucy," she said. "I might threaten to stay here whether the rest of you went on or not. I jolly well think I shall."
"Obey the High King, your Majesty," said Trumpkin, "and let's be off. If I'm not allowed to sleep, I'd as soon march as stand here talking."
And so at last they got on the move. Lucy went first, biting her lip and trying not to say all the things she thought of saying to Susan. But she soon forgot them when her eyes fixed on Aslan. He turned and walked at a slow pace, about 30 yards ahead of them. The others had only Lucy's directions to guide them, for Aslan was not only invisible to them, but silent as well. His big, cat-like paws made no noise on the grass. His big, cat-like paws. Aren't they just big cat paws. Like, they're not cat-like. They're just cat's paws. This dog is very dog-like. Goodness. The big cat-like cat. I sure hope they're cat-like. I know, right? Like, nothing worse than man-like paws on a big cat. That's the stuff of nightmares. He'd led them right to the edge of the dancing trees. Whether they were still dancing, nobody knew, for Lucy had her eyes on the lion, and the rest had their eyes on Lucy, and nearer the edge of the gorge. Cobbles and kettle drums, thought Trumpkin. I hope this madness isn't going to end in a moonlight climb and broken necks. For a long way, Aslan went along the top of the precipices. Then they came to a place where some little trees grew right on the edge. He turned and disappeared among them. Lucy held her breath, for it looked as if he had plunged over the cliff. But she was too busy keeping him in sight to stop and think about this. She quickened her pace and was soon among the trees herself. Looking down, she could see a steep and narrow path going slantwise down into the gorge between rocks, and Aslan descending it. He turned and looked at her with his happy eyes. Lucy clapped her hands and began to scrabble down after him. From behind her, she heard the voices of the others shouting, "Hi, Lucy! Look out, for goodness sake! You're right on the edge of the gorge! Come back!" And then, a moment later, Edmund's voice saying, "No, she's right. There is a way down." Halfway down the path, Edmund caught up with her. "Look," he said in great excitement. "Look! What's that shadow crawling down in front of us?" "It's his shadow," said Lucy. "I do believe you're right, Lou," said Edmund. "I can't think how I didn't see it before. But where is he?" "With his shadow, of course. Can't you see him?" "Well, I almost thought I did, for a moment. It's such a rum light."
"Get on, King Edmund, get on," came Trumpkin's voice from behind and above, and then, farther behind and still nearly at the top, Peter's voice saying, "Oh, buck up, Susan. Give me your hand. Why, a baby could get down here." And we love babies here at Brother Bedtime. And do stop grousing. In a few minutes, they were at the bottom, and the roaring of water filled their ears. Treading delicately, like a cat. Again, like a cat. This is incredible. What if Aslan isn't a cat? I don't think we can unpack that right now. Treading delicately, like a cat, Aslan stepped from stone to stone across the stream. In the middle he stopped, bent down to drink, and as he raised his shaggy head, dripping from the water, he turned to face them again. This time Edmund saw him. "Oh, Aslan!" he cried, darting forward. But the lion whisked round and began padding up the slope on the far side of the rush. "Peter! Peter!" cried Edmund. "Did you see?" "I saw something," said Peter, "but it's so tricky in this moonlight. On we go, though, and 3 cheers for Lucy. I don't feel half so tired now, either." Aslan, without hesitation, led them to their left, farther up the gorge. The whole journey was odd and dreamlike. The roaring stream, the wet grey grass, the glimmering cliffs which they were approaching, and always the glorious, silently pacing beast ahead. Everyone except Susan and the dwarf could see him now. Presently they came to another steep path, up the face of the farther precipices. These were far higher than the ones they had just descended, and the journey up them was a long and tedious zigzag. Fortunately, the moon shone right above the gorge, so that neither side was in shadow. Lucy was nearly blown when the tail and hind legs of Aslan disappeared over the top, but with one last effort she scrambled after him and came out,
rather shaky-legged and breathless, on the hill they had been trying to reach ever since they left Glasswater. The long, gentle slope, heather and grass and a very few big rocks that shone white in the moonlight, stretched up to where it vanished in a glimmer of trees about half a mile away. She knew it. It was the hill of the stone table. With a jingling of mail, the others climbed up behind her. Aslan glided on before them, and they walked after him. "Lucy," said Susan in a very small voice. "Yes," said Lucy. "I see him now. I'm sorry." "That's all right. But I've been far worse than you know. I really believed it was him. Yesterday, when he warned us not to go down to the fir wood. And I really believed it was him tonight, when you woke us up. Deep down inside. Or I could have, if I'd let myself. But I just wanted to get out of the woods oh, I don't know. Whatever am I going to say to him?" "Perhaps you needn't say much," suggested Lucy. Soon they reached the trees, and through them the children could see the great mound, Aslan's How, which had been raised over the table since their days. "Our side don't keep very good watch." "Oh, our side don't keep very good watch," muttered Trumpkin. "We ought to have been challenged before now." "Hush," said the other four, for now Aslan had stopped and turned and stood facing them, looking so majestic that they felt as glad as anyone who feels a... Let me try that one again. Looking so majestic that they felt as glad as anyone can who feels afraid, and as afraid as anyone can who feels glad. That's some more of that Kierkegaard's fear and trembling stuff. Oh, he's not a cat. He's God. I think you hit the nail on the head, Mulric. A very cat-like God, but a god-like cat in this instance. Yes, the fear and trembling. The boys strode forward. Lucy made way for them. Susan and the dwarf shrank back. "Oh, Aslan," said King Peter, dropping on one knee and raising the lion's heavy paw to his face. "I'm so glad, and I'm so sorry. I've been leading them wrong ever since we started, and especially yesterday morning." "My dear son," said Aslan. Then he turned and welcomed Edmund. "Well done," were his words. Then, after an awful pause, the deep voice said, "Susan." Susan made no answer, but the others thought she was crying. "You have listened to fears, child," said Aslan. "Come, let me breathe on you. Forget them. Are you brave again?" "A little, Aslan," said Susan. "And now," said Aslan, in a much louder voice, with just a hint of a roar in it while his tail lashed his flanks, "and now, where is this little dwarf, this famous swordsman and archer who doesn't believe in lions? Come here, son of earth. Come here!" And the last word was no longer the hint of a roar, but almost the real thing. "Wraiths and wreckage!" Let me try that one again. "Wraiths and wreckage!" gasped Trumpkin in the ghost of a voice. The children, who knew Aslan well enough to see that he liked the dwarf very much, were not disturbed. But it was quite another thing for Trumpkin, who had never seen a lion before, let alone this lion. He did the only sensible thing he could have done. That is, instead of bolting, he tottered toward Aslan. Aslan pounced. Have you ever seen a very young kitten being carried in the mother cat's mouth? It was like that. The dwarf, hunched up in a little miserable ball, hung from Aslan's mouth. The lion gave him one shake, and all his armor rattled like a tinker's pack. And then, hey presto, the dwarf flew up into the air. He was as safe as if he had been in bed, though he did not feel so. and as he came down, the huge velvety paws caught him as gently as a mother's arms, and set him right way up, too, on the ground.
Son of Earth, shall we be friends?
Asked Aslan.
Yes,
Panted the dwarf, for it had not yet got its breath back.
Now, said Aslan, the moon is setting. Look behind you. There is the dawn beginning. We have no time to lose. You three, you sons of Adam and son of Earth, hasten into the mound and deal with what you will find there.
Here we can see a picture of Aslan looking indeed larger than some of the other renditions we've seen him, shaking Trumpkin like a Cabbage Patch doll, getting absolutely put into his tiny dwarfy little place. Mulric says, I love this dwarf and his sayings. Yeah, wreckage and wraiths is a really good one.
Bed knobs and broomsticks.
I can imagine that one easily enough. The dwarf was still speechless, and neither of the boys dared to ask if Aslan would follow them. All three drew their swords and saluted, then turned and jingled away into the dusk. Lucy noticed that there was no sign of weariness in their faces. Both the High King and King Edmund looked more like men than boys. The girls watched them out of sight, standing close beside Aslan. The light was changing. Low down in the east, Erebir, the morning star of Narnia, gleamed like a little moon. Aslan, who seemed larger than before, lifted his head, shook his mane, and roared. The sound, deep and throbbing at first, like an organ beginning on a low note, rose and became louder, and then far louder again, till the earth and air were shaking with it. It rose up from the hill and floated across all Narnia. Down in Miraz's camp, men woke, stared palely into one another's faces, and grasped their weapons. Down below that, in the great river, now at its coldest hour, the heads and shoulders of the nymphs, and the great weedy bearded head of the river god, rose from the water. Beyond it, in every field and wood, the alert ears of rabbits rose from their holes, the sleepy heads of birds came out from under wings, owls hooted, vixens barked, hedgehogs grunted, the trees stirred. In towns and villages, mothers pressed babies close to their breasts, staring with wild eyes. Dogs whimpered, and men leapt up, groping for lights. Far away on the northern horizon, on the northern frontier, the mountain giants peered from the dark gateways of their castles. Here we can see a small artist's, what do you call a triptych in 4 parts? A quadric? That's probably wrong. But here we can see all of these events taking place across Narnia in these lovely little coin-sized vignettes. The rabbits, the soldiers, the water spirits, and the animals. All getting looped in, receiving a notification in their soul that Aslan is on the prowl. Bing! You've got mail. What Lucy and Susan saw was a dark something coming to them from almost every direction across the hills. It looked first like a black mist creeping on the ground, then like the stormy waves of a black sea rising higher and higher as it came on, and then, at last, like what it was, woods on the move. All the trees of the world appeared to be rushing toward Aslan. But as they drew nearer, they looked less like trees. And when the whole crowd, bowing and curtsying and waving thin, long arms to Aslan, were all round Lucy, she saw that it was a crowd of human shapes. Pale birch girls were tossing their heads. Willow women pushed back their hair from their brooding faces to gaze on Aslan. The queenly beeches stood still and adored him. Shaggy oak men, lean and melancholy elms, shock-headed hollies, dark themselves, but their wives all bright with berries, and gay rowans all bowed and rose again, shouting, "Aslan! Aslan!" in their various husky or creaking or wave-like voices. The crowd and the dance round Aslan, for it had become a dance once more, grew so thick and rapid that Lucy was confused. She never saw where certain other people came from, who were soon capering about among the trees. One was a youth, dressed only in a fawn's skin, with vine leaves wreathed in his curly hair. His face would have been almost too pretty for a boy's, if it had not looked so extremely wild. You felt, as Edmund said when he saw him a few days later, "There's a chap who might do anything, absolutely anything." He seemed to have a great many names. Bromios, Basarius, and the Ram were 3 of them. There were a lot of girls with him, as wild as he. There was even, unexpectedly, someone on a donkey. And everyone was laughing, and everybody was shouting out, "Yuan, Yuan, you oi, oi, oi." God, I know that C.S. Lewis was a staunch Christian, but the way that he weaves together the mythology and the stories from other, faith traditions, I guess you would call them, particularly the more extinct ones like Greek mythology and things like that, is just so lovely. I mean, even the nod to astrology that sort of is often glanced over in the Christian story. The whole thing came about because of the Star of Bethlehem, and these 3 kings showed up. That's how the world became apprised of the situation. Even that's kind of echoed at the beginning with his lectures with Cornelius regarding the rising of, what was it? Iluvatar? No, that's a Lord of the Rings thing. But the 2 stars at the beginning of the book. The portents in the sky signifying great events in the land is something that I think almost every faith tradition or religion or societal or cultural interpretation of meaning in the world, the stars are important, guys. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, Anyways, back to the story. Do you guys like stars? I like stars. Stars are pretty cool. The moon, too. Big fan of the moon. "Is it a romp, Aslan?" cried the youth, and apparently it was. But nearly everyone seemed to have a different idea as to what they were playing. It may have been Tig, but Lucy never discovered who was it. Tig? I guess that must be some Old English for tag. And by Old English, I mean like 1950s English. Is it a romp? And it was. Space is cool and also terrifying. Yeah, kind of like Aslan. There's some more of that delicious Kierkegaardian fear and trembling. It may have been Tig, but Lucy never discovered who was it. It was rather like Blind Man's Bluff. Blind Man's Buff. Blind Man's Buff? I've always called it Blind Man's Bluff. Huh. All these one-letter changes are really throwing me for a loop. It may have been Tig, but Lucy never discovered who was it. It was rather like Blind Man's Buff, only everyone behaved as if they were blindfolded. It was not unlike Hunt the Slipper, but the slipper was never found. What made it more complicated was that the man on the donkey, who was old and enormously fat, began calling out at once, "Refreshments! Time for refreshments!" and falling off his donkey and being bundled onto it again by the others, while the donkey was under the impression that the whole thing was a circus and tried to give a display of walking on its hind legs. And all the time there was more and more vine leaves everywhere, and as soon not only leaves, but vines. They were climbing up everything. They were running up the legs of the tree people and circling round their necks. Lucy put up her hands to push back her hair and found she was pushing back vine branches. The donkey was a mass of them. His tail was completely entangled, and something dark was nodding between his ears. Lucy looked again and saw it was a bunch of grapes. After that, it was mostly grapes, overhead and underfoot and all around. "Refreshments! Refreshments!" roared the old man. Everyone began eating.
And whatever hothouses your people may have, you have never tasted such grapes. Really good grapes, firm and tight on the outside, but bursting into cool sweetness when you put them into your mouth, were one of the things the girls had never had quite enough of before. Here, there were more than anyone could possibly want, and no table manners at all. One saw sticky and stained fingers everywhere, and though mouths were full, the laughter never ceased, nor the yodeling cries of you on, you oi, 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 till all of a sudden everyone felt at the same moment that the game, whatever it was, and the feast ought to be over, and everyone flopped down breathless on the ground, and turned their faces to Aslan to hear what he would say next. At that moment the sun was just rising, and Lucy remembered something and whispered to Susan, "I say, Sue, I know who they are." "Who?" "The boy with the wild face is Bacchus, and the old one on the donkey is Silenus. Don't you remember Mr. Tumnus telling us about them long ago?" "Yes, of course. But I say, Lou." "What?" "I wouldn't have felt safe with Bacchus and all his wild girls if we'd met them without Aslan." "I should think not," said Lucy. And that is the end of the chapter. Here we can see a tiny little drawing of this amazing bacchanalian revel, which was overseen and kept in check by our cat-like god Aslan. Wonderful. Yeah, that was a proper revel. They got the grapes, they got the laughing, they got the wild abandon. Now, I've read about Bacchus, but I don't know about Silenus. I feel like there's a Wikipedia in my near future. Nevertheless, my dear friends and family, that is the end of our story for tonight. This is great. He's doing a great service in many ways to the whole Christian narrative by making Aslan cool with partying. He's like the chaperone at a high school grad. Thanks for keeping everybody safe, Mr. Big Cat Man. What do we think of the story so far, folks? Any predictions for how things are going to shake out in the next little bit? We've still got to find King Miraz. I think it's so funny that what happened there? The boys and the dwarf got sent into the cave with swords drawn to do who knows what, and the girls stuck around and just got to have a sweet rager. That doesn't seem like a very fair deal, but maybe we finally get to see a battle, Mulric? I imagine so. The next chapter is, and I will share the name of this one with you, Sorcery and Sudden Vengeance. It sounds very exciting, so I'm really excited to see exactly what variety of sorcery and sudden vengeance there is. The boys were the reason it took so long to get to the party. That's true. Lucy, at the very least, was well deserving of a night on the town. And Sue, who knows? Maybe it'll help her lighten up a little bit. At any rate, everybody, that's the end of our story for tonight. If you missed anything from the previous weeks, feel free to check out the archives. If you would like to stay abreast of everything happening here on the show, you can click that follow button. You'll get notifications whenever we go live. So far, the schedule has been Monday through Thursday, but you never know. I might decide to do a surprise stream sometime in the future. Mulric says, thanks for the story. My pleasure, Mulric. Thanks for tuning in. I've got some digital content coming your way tomorrow as well, so I look forward to chatting with you a little bit more about our burgeoning project, which we'll be announcing on Monday. Yeah, the word's going out on Monday. So for now, my lips are sealed, but thanks again for tuning in, everybody, and I wish you all very sweet dreams and a lovely rest and a great weekend, and we'll see you back here on Monday evening for some sudden sorcery and revenge. Good night, moon, and good night, stars. Good night, trucks, and good night, cars. Good night, shoes, and good night, hats. Good night, dogs, and good night, cats. Good night to friends and family. Good night to you, and to me. Sweet dreams, everybody.